I want to thank all of you who are here, and I certainly want to thank all of you who submitted responses and feedback online to the draft that we published for this. And I want to let you know how important that feedback is to us as we move through this process. I want to talk a little bit about the project because it's certainly more than just a document to me. I'm glad that System is asking for a strategic plan initiative around this goal setting through the compacts. It helps us to put together where we want to go and sort of set out some goals and some initial strategies. And I think Mizzou should certainly be looking toward these types of goals, and just simply because they're consistent with the things that we want to do at a high quality AAU research institution, and we want to set bold goals. Nothing in this document should be surprising to any of you. I think it's stuff we've talked about. It's things that I talked about at the Student Success Forum. It's things I talked about at the Research Forum. It's things you've heard from Marshall Stewart about engagement, Mark McIntosh about research, things that Rhonda has been saying to people about budget and how we're trying to move these forward. So I'm hoping that you realize that none of those should be surprising to you. And in fact, the goal-setting conversation to me is really the straightforward part. I say that simply because I want to make it clear that we're not just sitting back and making a plan here. We're acting on it too. I know sometimes, and I'm sure the past 9 months has probably felt that way, that we're building a plane while we're flying it. And I think that's actually somewhat the case. The time that we're talking about in this plan is 2028, where the plan ends, but that's not when we should be working and thinking about we're going to start doing things towards the end of that. It's now, and we need to focus on achieving demonstrable results as we move forward. And I say that because everyone has a strategic plan, and by now, for most of us in higher education, strategic plans have sort of become a joke in that everybody talks about the fact that they're on the shelves and not implemented. And I think what we need to do is focus on how do we implement one? How do we achieve what we want to achieve? And I think you'll notice that in how we've been operating and how we've been moving towards some of these goals that are already in the draft plan. I hope you saw that in what we did with the strategic enrollment management process, is that we had a committee that started working on strategic enrollment management, setting goals, thinking about strategies, thinking about what we would do, but we didn't wait for that committee to be done. We started implementing some of those strategies as we were going along. And that's how we managed to get to a point where our admissions are up and our deposits are up for the fall. If we had not done that, we wouldn't have seen those results. And so that's what we want to do is continue along that way. And I think one of the things that I need to do a better job of is sharing with you those successes, the things that we're doing, the steps we're taking, and how that's moving this institution forward. And that we're really an institution that's driven by the ability to make data-informed decisions. And for me, it's always that those small steps are what take you to achieving those bold goals. And so I really do focus on the small steps day by day. And in that spirit, I want to just share a little bit about what I'm thinking here. And you've seen strategic planning processes before, but I wanted to share this with you and talk about this really in this two phases. Phase one, where we're looking at what we want to set for goals. And today, of course, I want to talk to you about step two predominantly, which is really gathering input and thinking about a SWOT analysis, what types of things we can be doing. And we want to get your input on how do we prioritize and refine our goals. I know from some of the feedback we've already received that you want to hear details about how we will pay for these initiatives and support the students that we will recruit and retain. We hear that, we understand that. We hear your concerns about how you may personally fit into the plan. And we need to think really about this next phase and your involvement. And the reason that I highlighted the phase two is that some of the questions that we've received and some of the feedback we've received will be answered in that phase. We will go through every potential strategy and think about how we implement it. And we will make decisions that are cost-benefit related in terms of, is this something we should or shouldn't do? At this stage, what we want to do is make sure we have enough strategies and the right goals that we could then think about what are those things we should be doing moving forward. And that requires you. I think it ties into how we develop those strategies, implementation plans. We want to identify current barriers and incentives that exist, for example, for research excellence. I need people who are going to think about the same thing as we craft our measures for planning, operation, and stewardship. And we're going to build those teams and really, over the next few years, go through and make sure that we are all on the same page with which of these we're going to implement and why it's important to this institution. And that will be really moving quickly, getting representative groups together later this year. We hope that we'll have a new provost by then. Nothing wrong with the current one.
No.
I think he's excited too. So. But this plan is, I want you to know that it's a living document. I want us to be thinking constantly about how we improve, constantly about how we go through the second phase of this. And it really requires you to be involved, you to be engaged. It is this institution's plan. It is the plan of the people who are here, our staff, our faculty, and our students. All of you need to be engaged in this. And I want you to think of this as I envision it, that Mizzou is a place of innovation. It's a place of really thinking outside the box and setting us up as the leaders in higher education, which means that Mizzou is truly going to be a living laboratory in everything we do. And we're going to take some chances. We're going to do some things that other institutions may not do, but we're going to do them when we all come together and make sure that it's the right things to do. So we're going to have to push ourselves and, of course, figure out how we're going to build that plane because it really has taken off. And I want you to all join me on that. And so today what I'm going to do is ask the leaders for the 5 compacts to speak a little bit about a few of the key priorities, and then we'll all be ready for your questions when they're done. So we'll go through them one at a time, and we'll start with Jim.
Good morning. As Chancellor Cartwright said, this is not a great deal of new because it's really being drawn from the Strategic Enrollment Management Plan that Dr. Paloma Morris and Dean Pat Oker have been guiding for the campus for some time. And so what we've tried to avoid is establishing different goals, but actually align the goals so that they're stacking in alignment, because we can't afford competing and duplicating efforts. We just don't have the resources, time, personnel, money, not to be unified in the efforts that we're making. So some examples, and again, I think this goes back to Chancellor Cartwright's comment that we've not been standing around waiting. These are things that we've actually already started working towards accomplishing. But retention, we've got a 93% retention goal. We're currently at 87%. That was last year, it was our second highest retention rate in our history. And I know that the associate deans and the academic advisors working with the deans are working right now to address students who haven't re-enrolled for the fall, to see what we can do to help them get re-enrolled and on path for the next one, which would be graduation rates. Our goal is to increase our 4-year graduation rate by 20%. And then in addition to that, a 95% successful placement rate at the time of graduation. Last year, we had 9 out of 10 of our students had a successful outcome. And so again, we're well on our way. We have a destination survey in place that involves all of the career centers and schools and colleges on campus to help us be very intentional. So as Dr. Cartwright indicated, doing the right thing. and already working towards that. So an example on student success, changes that we've made to our student charge accounts, working with Gary Ward and his interim role as Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs and the staff in our cashier's office. We've got a recommendation for how we're going to restructure how students use their student charge to help avoid financial issues and barriers to their being able to continue. Our early alert system, MU Connect, which we continue to expand, that allows us to intercede with students earlier before they reach a problem point in the semester. And then our predictive analytics platform that we'll be standing up and launching later this spring, going into the fall, should add additional tools for us to further improve student success rates. 100% of our students are going to complete 2 or more high-impact learning practices. And we're not doing this so that we can say, look at what our students get to do. We're doing this because it's in the best interest of our students and them achieving the learning outcomes. It goes back, this is the right thing to do. But we're already well down that path. Over 40% of our students complete at least one service learning course while they're here. We're going to send over 1,000 students abroad. We've got students that do internships and externships. We have students that are doing undergraduate research in labs across the campus right now. They're in the labs creating new knowledge, discovery research. And we've long had a broad network of freshman seminars. Those are all the things that would fulfill that high impact practice. We're also beginning a conversation about an extended transcript, because it's one thing to have them do it. It's another thing for us to be able to know what they've done and be able to evaluate the impact of the things that they're doing. And so MU is working with Brenda Selman and in the registrar's office and others to explore how would we adopt that. We would be one of the earlier adopters in an institution this size to bring that tool to our campus. OER, everyone knows what OER is, right? Open Educational Resources. No, it's secret code, you see. That's what we're really good at in higher education. Open Education Resources, which our goal is to reduce the overall cost of books, textbooks. And so it's open educational. We'll also add affordable. And the goal is that it's our students are paying $40 or less for their educational materials. We've had a task force on our campus working on that for over 2 years, co-chaired by Grace Atkins and Dana Wren and Jeanette. The library and the bookstore are all involved in that effort. And then double the number of students applying for national awards. Right now in our fellowships office, we have one person that works full-time doing that, and we've reallocated funding internal, and we're on the verge of announcing a new assistant director, because we can't do that without making an investment, and we're already allocating funds internally to be able to support that goal. So bring great students to our campus, help them be successful, give them great experiences that make them competitive for the career opportunities that they want to have when they graduate, and graduate them into career opportunities that they're excited, while we've minimized the educational or the financial burden that they have to accomplish all that. That's our goal, and we're working hard every day to make that a reality.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mark?
Thank you. So obviously, the University of Missouri is a preeminent research institution. We are classified as Research 1, AAU, land-grant university, and all three of those features of this great institution depend upon the creative activities and scholarship of our faculty, postdocs, and students. And so we really have got to focus on how we provide those constituencies the resources that they need to continue to develop their scholarship going forward. All that we do in terms of research and creative works depends upon a talented community of faculty and postdoctoral students and postdoctoral fellows and graduate students. So that means that we really have to focus in several key areas going forward in the future. You heard the Chancellor say in February that one of our very important goals should be to double our research output over the next 5 to 10 years. And the question is, what does that really mean to us? How do we get there? It's a very, very steep hill to climb from where we've been. Primary to our ability to do that is to establish a very robust recruitment and retention structure for our faculty, for our postdocs, and for our graduate students. And that means very important career development activities, very important mentoring activities, and a research advancement and support structure that's put in place to help these faculty get to those lofty objectives. So, part of it will be strategic recruitment of faculty in targeted areas where a comprehensive university like the University of Missouri can make a big difference. Part of it will be in collaboration with our extensive extension and engagement network across the state to begin to address grand challenges around the state and region. Part of it will be to attract the best scholars here that we possibly can. So how do we get to the point of doubling our extramural research expenditures over the next 5 years? If you do the math, it's pretty simple. It's a 15% increase in our expenditures on a yearly basis. 15% every year for the next 5 years will get us over 100% in a 5-year period of time. Those are not incremental changes. Those are transformational changes. And to do transformational changes means that we have to be much more strategic in how we invest our resources going forward. We have to evaluate our research capabilities. We have to find areas of synergy. We have to find areas where we can integrate the multiple talents around this campus. As one of the most comprehensive universities in the country, we have a lot of unique capabilities in which to invest. The comprehensive nature of this campus, and you add to it the most powerful research reactor in the country, we have some wonderful opportunities for investment here that can grow our research in many different areas. Obviously, for those kinds of transformational changes, the biggest increases that are possible are in STEM-related disciplines and applied areas of things like agriculture and education and engineering and medicine. And so you'll hear us talking about investments in those key areas like the Translational Precision Medicine Complex, a very bold objective. We haven't built a $200 million research facility on this campus, in the 37 years I've been here. The biggest research investment we made was a $60 million building. So we have a long ways to go to reach an objective like that. But the nice thing about the Translational Precision Medicine building is it gives us an opportunity to bring all areas of our campus together to work on significant and strategic research problems. Now, when we talk about those kinds of investments, immediately part of our faculty and part of our community feels like they're left out. The arts and humanities, the social and behavioral sciences, and nothing could be farther from the truth. The kinds of grand challenges that the state of Missouri are throwing at us at this point in time requires all of our intellect in order to be able to move the needle forward. There are community-based social and educational problems that we have to work on together if we're going to meet these grand challenges. So it's not just about furthering research in medicine or furthering research in engineering. It's about all of us coming together as an academic community to strive towards interdisciplinary and multifaceted approaches to these significant research problems. We rely on our unique resources, the unique resources of our faculty, staff, and students in order to be able to pull this together. And most importantly, we're going to have to invest significantly in our research support infrastructure. So the areas of the compact that you'll see in research and creative works really has to do with key strategic areas that include infrastructure support, that include faculty recruitment and retention, that include postdoc and graduate student recruitment and retention that include building a much more entrepreneurial ecosystem. The students and faculty that come to us these days are looking for multiple outlets for their creative works. And sometimes those outlets are going to be in the corporate world, application of their research to a significant problem. And our ability to help those faculty take their applications and put them into practice. So the research and creative works strategic planning that happens over the next several months will engage all aspects of our university community to move the University of Missouri forward in being able to meet the challenges and the needs of our land-grant mission, of our AAU mission, and of our Research One mission to the state of Missouri.
Marshall.
Thank you, Chancellor, and it's always good to visit with faculty and staff across this campus. And what I'm going to do is set the stage for this by sharing with you a tad bit about the narrative of how we came to where we are today. I think you know this institution has a great history in terms of extension and certainly engagement. We're a Carnegie classified institution. That was long before I got here. And certainly if you look at the depth and the breadth of this institution, as Dr. McIntosh has talked about in terms of the research, and as Dr. Spain talked about in terms of the great teaching, it makes sense that you would also have great engagement. And that is something I found when I got here, so it's not anything I had to create. It was rather trying to figure out how do you organize and how do you begin to put synergy around that so that you can expand that out and tell a better story and also do it in a better way. To me, institutions, as has already been expressed, we talk about being, all the research designations we have and the great teaching institution we have. One of the things that I think is really important for us to all think about is why do we exist? And we really are in the knowledge business. And I like to break it down this way. We do knowledge creation, that's called research. We do knowledge transfer, that's called teaching. And we do knowledge application, that's called extension and or engagement. And so it is in that area of how do you take that knowledge and apply it to the people, those who may never come to this campus or those who may intersect very lightly with this campus, either in the state of Missouri or around the world. How do you figure out how to do that? Because that harkens back to the land-grant mission of trying to be in public service and be a public-facing institution. So what we did and what we've done and what has informed our work in this so far is, if you go back over the last couple of years, I think many people know we've done a needs assessment of the state. And it really identified in talking to stakeholders around the state, also looking at quantitatively what the data told us, it was really there are three broad buckets of issues that people in Missouri are concerned about, and they surround the economy, education, and health. I think you would find that in many states. I don't think Missouri is unique in that. But people want to have a growing, prosperous economy. They want to have a strong educational workforce preparation operation going on in their communities. And they also aspire to have great health care, because when you find those three things standing up in a community, you find a vibrant community. You will find that if you find one of those three pillars, the other pillars tend to rise with it. So when you think about an institution like ours, you think about our assets, our strengths, and all the things we have. Certainly we can play in that space. That gives us a place to really make a difference in communities. So when we take a look at where we are today, and you look at the screen, you will see some things there that give you some examples of things that are already in action. As Dr. Spain talked about, we haven't been just waiting to do this. We were already in that action process. So when this process of planning for the system and also for the campus came along, we already had things we could put in the pipeline. So if you look at the first one, it talks about restructuring Mu Extension. We have been in the process of that now for about the last 6 months. It'll be fully realized in January 2019, when in every county in the state of Missouri, you will have a county engagement specialist, a person that focuses not only on the needs of that community, but also how do you extend the institution out in those communities around the ideas of economy, education, and health. That'll be a shift for our system, but it will truly bring in alignment what we do outstate along with what we do on this campus. If you look at the next bullet, you'll see there how we engage Missourians. Right now, we do, through Mu Extension alone, engage about 1 million or so Missourians a year based on the data we have and the number of people that participate in programs, either face-to-face, online, or in some way we connect with. We do want to raise that number. We believe by leveraging our high-touch value, which we're still going to be strong in, along with high-tech, we can actually move that needle because there's an opportunity here to, again, bring greater discipline focus across many disciplines into that, from medicine, from engineering, and many areas that perhaps we haven't teased into enough through our current model. So that's another way we think we can do that. We talk about an idea called a Rhodes Scholar Program, and you'll notice how we spell road, R-O-A-D. If you know anything about me, you know I spend a lot of time on the road, and it's not that I can't spell well. That is meant to be that way. But that Rhodes Scholar means we want to have opportunities for our faculty, especially those who are in the work that Dr. McIntosh, Dr. Spain have talked about in terms of teaching and research, to be out on the road to see what's happening in Missouri, because there's the best way, I can tell you the best way to know about Missouri is to be with Missourians, and you understand the needs, the grand challenges they have in their community. So one of the things we want to do is have times in the year when we can put people on the road to have meaningful experiences, faculty, perhaps new administrators coming into the work, so that they can truly understand the state that we serve here and where we live every day here in Columbia, Missouri. You also see we talk about having engaged scholarship seminars. We think that's something really important, because there is this whole concept of engaged scholarship, and how do you document that in promotion and tenure, and how do you move that needle? And we think about a lot of our younger faculty that are now coming in, those newly minted assistant professors, and what they really want to do, a lot of them, is action-oriented research. They want to be out in the field doing things and that kind of work, but you have to be able to document that. You have to be able to show that value. So that's going to be an important part of our conversation, is to cause our campus to have that conversation around how do we change that in the right way so that it truly embodies everything that we want to be as a Research One institution. You also see up there we've got staff engagement. That's something we haven't overlooked as I look out to my friends in the audience here that are staff, because we think there's a role for them to play. We think there's a place where they can be in this space to help us carry out this, and we think they already do it, in fact, but we haven't captured that well. And so we were already having conversations with them about how do we bring you into this mix better? How do we make sure that the work you do every day, that you can see yourself playing in this space of engagement because you do it well, but let's figure out how to, again, recognize that and draw it to the forefront in a better way. You also see things like our new All Things Missouri portal, which will go live here in, I think, on May 3rd. And that's a new way that we're going to be able to interact with our communities across the state. One of the things we found in our needs assessment when we looked at the data of Missouri, is there was no place that you could go one stop and find all that data. There should be a place in Missouri where you go and you can find all the economic data, all the agricultural data, all the healthcare data, all the data around environment or whatever, and that had not been done here that we could find. So we found a space here that we could actually do something good for Missourians, and we pull that data together, and we're going to launch a new site called All Things Missouri, which will allow not only those on this campus community, but all 6 million Missourians will be able to go to that site, see their community. Actually, if they want to look at a health indicator, for instance, they'll be able to do it by zip code and actually see what the health indicators are in their community. They'll be able to overlay that with education data, with environmental data. And if you think about it being an economic planner or maybe a county commissioner, that'd be great knowledge for you to have about how can you leverage the institution's values and bring them into your community or do other things. It doesn't always have to be us, but it's their data, and we felt like they should have access to it. So we're excited about releasing that, and we think that's going to be a great tool for Missourians. The last thing you see there is a new series of programming for K-12 success, and one of the things that's already been noted in some of the feedback is we ought to be looking at pre-K and also beyond 12. And so we're sensitive to that. We're already seeing that impact, that feedback come in, and we want to certainly look at a broader scope if that's what we need to do. But we really think if you look at those three big issues of the economy, education, and health, and you think about the state of Missouri, there's 500 and some school systems in this state, school districts in this state. And that is one of the areas that we think as an institution, not only from an opportunity to recruit more students, which is important to all of us, but what's the greater good here, and what's the greater good that we can provide here in helping all students achieve well so that they do have a pathway to community college, to other institutions if that's the best choice for them. And for those who make that choice, that they have the opportunity to come here. We do not believe that any child should be in any way disadvantaged by their zip code. And unfortunately in this state, in some areas that you live in, because of where you live, you don't get the same kinds of educational experience as other children. And we think that's something this institution, through our College of Education and other aspects of the institution, can really do some good work with. So we think there's a great opportunity here. But one of the things I want to close with, and there's a lot more in here we could certainly talk about, is I think it's important for you to realize and think about that we don't do this alone as a silo. If you think about the way this thing is structured, you have the academics, you have the research, you have engagement, extension, diversity and inclusion, and efficiency and effectiveness, these silos. But it's really important to understand that we don't work in silos. In order for us to do our work well, research is going to have to be very successful. And for them to be successful, we've got to be pulling information in. So what you're beginning to see is great partnerships already between the Office of Research and the Office of Extension Engagement. We believe that great teaching can be enhanced by great engagement. And if we figure out how to do that well, then the provost office and all those folks in the teaching can actually do a better job because we have engaged learners. We believe if we do our work well, that diversity and inclusion will go up because, again, we're intersecting with communities in Missouri and faculty and staff. And if we do our job well, we'll be effective and efficient in all that we do. So I hope that makes sense as we kind of think about our work. Our work permeates all these areas, but it's also their work permeates us too. And we think that's a place we can go and own in the future.
Thank you, Marshall. Kevin.
So let me take a page out of Marshall's book and provide just a bit of a recap. This Compact for Inclusive Excellence really is the scaled version of our larger community effort and our larger system effort that wraps around the Inclusive Excellence framework that we worked to develop collaboratively and organically as a community that focused on 5 areas of organizational function. In fact, we started with 4, and the community told us that we needed to add a 5th, and so we did. They are access and success for our faculty, staff, and students, campus climate and intergroup relations, education and scholarship, the institutional infrastructure, and then lastly, community engagement. As one might expect, assets and success really focuses on kind of those pipeline and increasing the compositional diversity for our faculty, staff, and students, but also identifying those supportive pillars that will help them more often than not successfully navigate their experience here at the institution. Campus climate and intergroup relations, which is also kind of represented by that first bullet up there, is really thinking and focusing on enhancing the perceptions of our environment as one that's inclusive and supportive of the skills, talents, and abilities that all possess, right? No one should have to kind of check who they are when they enter this living, learning, and working environment. Under education and scholarship, we're really talking about graduating our students to operate as effective citizens in a global marketplace, and how are we supporting our faculty, staff, and students in that regard. And so thinking about our curricular offerings and ways in which we can support that to infuse inclusion into them is an important aspect that we've captured in our broader framework and attempted to scale down and capture in this compact. Thinking about our institutional infrastructure, which we didn't focus a lot on as much in the compact, but it's still brought a large part of our broader effort for our campus plan, really thinks about our policies, our processes, and our practices, and the meaningful connection to diversity and inclusion that serves as a help and not a hindrance to moving this work forward. And then community engagement, there was a recognition by our community that there was still a bit of a disconnect and an opportunity to more meaningfully connect the institution with the town gown. And we really took those recommendations to heart. And in fact, I think we can really be proud of the things that have resulted. This community, particularly our Columbia community, Boone County, other aspects of the state have really embraced our framework. We've actually taken the time to recreate it and remove kind of some of the higher ed references to allow it to serve as a backdrop for our entire community, kind of making the claim that we want to become the nation's first inclusive excellence city and county. And so it's been fantastic. The community has ran with it, have in fact created their own website, inclusivejourney.org, and we've really been pleased. But this is also part of a broader effort. Some of the offerings at the initial part of this discussion talked about funding mechanisms for this work. And at the system, there are reoccurring funds to support diversity and inclusion for our campuses. And so we've attached that to the Inclusive Excellence Framework kind of developmental plans from all of the campuses. So here at MU, as part of a comprehensive effort, administrative and academic units were asked to complete inclusive excellence plans that really fit metrics, goals, objectives, strategies, and indicators that were most relevant to their organization, to their particular unit, rolled into what ultimately was captured as an MU Inclusive Excellence Plan and rolled to the system, where there was an advisory council comprised of faculty, staff, and students from each campus that reviewed the plans, offered a critique of the plans, and identified how the funds that were sitting there to be used to support diversity and inclusion would be distributed to support efforts that were identified within the plans that either affirmed, because the metrics suggested, affirmed initiatives that were going well, or identified, because the metrics also pointed out maybe some gaps that new initiatives could help support. And so that report that was facilitated and led by David Mitchell from our College of Law is ultimately receiving the last bit of revisions and feedback from the council, and will be disseminated to the campuses for the distribution of those funds by April 30th. So we have a reoccurring funding mechanisms to support this work. The intentionality is there with regard to, again, our campus effort to, again, go through both individual and organizational reflection to see how we can better ourselves in the diversity, equity, and inclusion arena. And I feel great about where we're going as a community, where we're going as an organization. But I think the biggest piece that I wanted this group to know is that this compact really represents the collective effort of our community, and was really our attempt to scale it down to meet the parameters that were set by system to identify some wonderful, maybe numeric goals that were attached to some level of creativity and innovation that might be bold for our community to think about. But as Chancellor Cartwright said, this is a living document that we will continue to reflect on as a community and change where we deem collectively most appropriate to serve our community.
Thank you, Kevin. Rhonda?
So I'd like to start where Kevin just ended in terms of it being a living document. In the kind of role I've always had, planning is, like my space. I love to plan. I want to, think through where we're headed. So sometimes it's frustrating when it feels like, well, we've got another strategic plan. We're going through another process. But part of the reason we have a living document is we are a people organization. And every single day, somebody new enters our community and someone departs, and we celebrate the graduations and we look at all those things. But being 180 years old, we have seen many, many amazing people come and contribute and move on. And so to me, it's a natural process that you have to keep planning, and you have to be willing to keep adjusting those plans as the things around you change. I say all that because that's something I have to say to myself every time someone's changing the plan. So I have the privilege to speak a little bit about the Compact for Excellence in Planning, Operations, and Stewardship. I'm speaking on behalf of many, many people, specifically some leaders that I have the privilege to work with, and Gary Ward and Patty Haverberger and Gary Allen. We're all very involved in thinking through how to try to put this compact together. It's something I know each of us believe in very strongly, and this was a way to try and put a compact together that describes broadly. And so why do you put all these sorts of things in writing and then tweak them? It's, as new people enter our community, it's good for them to have something to look at and see, well, where am I coming into and what is it they value? And then we work together to keep refining those things. So one thing I would say, having spent my entire career at the university working in what I will call support functions, it's a lot of us who do work in finance and IT and operations, facilities, human resources, you really enjoy your work because every day it's helping others be successful. It's really about the greater mission. So I like to say that in our operations, we kind of live on the edge. And what I mean by that is we aren't here to make our organizations the biggest we can or the most impressive we can. We're here to make sure that we do everything we can to make the missions of the university go well. And so I've heard Gary Ward say more than once, we don't want to be known as the university with the best pipes. We really wish fewer of them would break. But we aren't going to be what we need to be for this state because we just really do finance better than anyone else, or we do facilities better than anyone else. We need to do everything we can to support that, and not one bit more. And that's this fine line of being on the edge that I think a lot of us in leadership roles for these kinds of areas feel, is that tension between making sure that we're protecting the university from a compliance perspective, and helping the university find those places to invest, and doing what we can to keep the facilities working well and the IT infrastructure working, but trying to always be on that line that we're not trying so hard to do it well that we're sacrificing education, research, outreach, and other things that this university would do with those resources if they weren't held in the support functions. So part of what we think about in this compact is how do we ensure that we're testing ourselves constantly to that kind of standard? How do we make sure that we're doing everything we can to support this university, but really being as efficient and effective as we can so that resources can be reinvested in the academic mission? So the first bullet point you see is resource allocation model. I look around the room and I see a number of people who've listened to me speak about this topic before, and I'll keep it short. Folks know I can get quite excited about what a resource allocation model means for our institution. And it really dovetails with the point about transparency and how we make decisions. So we are undertaking a process with a committee of folks right now to start thinking about how might we do resource allocation differently so that it is from a high level, you can look in and you can understand how is it that these resources flow, where do they come from, and where are they going? And so we've got a group that's working on that. This won't be a sudden surprise. Oh no, here's the new resource model, and we have to suddenly make huge adjustments that people aren't prepared for. The point of doing a good resource allocation model is for people to understand what it does so that they can then make good plans, that they can react in ways that are moving the university forward. So with this new model, once we have a suggested model, that'll be tested with leadership of the campus. Once we go through that test and refinement, then it'll be something that gets shared very broadly for people's input, with the whole goal to be for people to understand, here's where the money comes from, here's what we're using it for, and you can have some insight into why things are the way they are. All of that also fits with fostering a culture of making data-informed decisions. I would tell you that many times I hear people question how other people came to decisions. Oftentimes, if you're close enough to it, you know that some amount of data was in fact used to come to that conclusion, but oftentimes if you're too far removed from it, you don't know what data they used, and you might actually think they should have added some other data into their thinking process. And so as we move forward, one of the things we want to make sure we're fostering is that people are absolutely using data to make decisions, but then one step further sharing with folks the kind of data they're using to make those decisions. And then in terms of trying to be efficient, there are several things that we think can come to play there. And certainly over time, what we're able to do with technology interventions as a university, we have been reaping the benefits of that slowly over time, and it's hard to ever quantify. How much have we saved because we're able to do things in a different manner than we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago? But the goal is to continue to assess what do we have available to us, and are we using it to our best advantage? So when we think about the IT kind of space and what sorts of tools can we use, trying to balance what does that tool bring to the table versus what outcome do we get, and how different does that look versus how we're doing it now. I'll close with just mentioning the administrative review that I think most of you are likely very aware of. The concept is for us to more carefully understand how it is we are deploying our workforce. So, there were 22 different functions. We asked all of our staff to give us input into, okay, where are you spending your time among these 22 functions, so that we could get another set of data to make decisions about, is that the best we can do? One, is it the most rewarding kinds of jobs we can be offering to our folks? But two, is it the most efficient way to do the work? So if we can continue to think about how do we harness all the resources we have as an institution and how do we align them to their best advantage. That's, to me, in a nutshell, what excellence in these spaces look like. And stewardship is always on my mind, and I know working with many of you folks really understand that the concept of stewardship is kind of what I've been talking about, making sure that you're using the resources that come from our taxpayers, our students and their families, to the best advantage we can. And if we do this part of it very well, then what that allows is resources to be directed into the kinds of things that the folks who were speaking before me were referencing.
All right, thank you. I'm going to stand up so I can actually see the whole room. I just want to give you a quick review of where we are. We're gathering input. We will also get additional input next week from review teams that were set up by the system from all the different other campuses. All of that will come together in a revised version that we will submit back to system in June. I think it's June 4th. Which will be that revised version, but then realize that we'll share that, of course, with you, all of you, and we'll probably make revisions even after that, but we'll continue along this process. So I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions or suggestions from the audience. So thank you for being here. And please use the mics. Start over here.
I just was wondering what plans you have in mind for how faculty will be kept abreast of the progress made with the compact in terms of, because I've been here for quite a while and have seen many strategic plans come out, and there's never any feedback loop in terms of, how are, take all of you who've just articulated metrics and goals and this and that. How will faculty understand how progress is occurring? And that's a complicated question because you have to set a base. Where a baseline is going to be set, when's the birth date of the compact and things like that. But I just wondered how you envision that's going to happen.
It's a great question, and it's an important question, and I agree with you completely, and that's why I made the comment earlier that I feel that I need to figure out ways to communicate this more effectively and share those successes and when we've made progress. So one of the things is I would be in favor of us figuring out some way, and we need help on this, figuring out some way that it's transparent, right? There's a website. Here's where we are. Here's where we are today. And we update that maybe quarterly or however often we do it, or however often makes sense. Some of them you wouldn't want to, retention you would only do once a year. But I agree, we need some process where we have that. And I think also, having more of meetings where we talk about where we are with these things would be good and have the community involved and able to ask questions. So it's a really good point. We're going to put it down that we need to come up with a plan for how we'll communicate this, and we'll look for suggestions on that too. So great point.
Could I also just offer that the Inclusive Excellence Framework, Tara Warney-Griggs has really been providing leadership to that from an assessment standpoint. That will be ultimately MU's plan will be posted on our IDE website. And the report from the Advisory Council that also identifies the allocations for the different campuses will be posted on the system website. So that will continue to be updated as Tara works with our different academic and administrative units, and that'll be a way to be kind of kept abreast of our efforts in that regard.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful from the perspective of faculty to, where possible, draw data that faculty have contributed. So, and that's not possible everywhere, obviously.
Yes.
But I do think there are places kind of along the way where faculty are either inputting data or being credited with data, so that there's just, because one of the things I liked about the program task force, the academic review, is it set a baseline. It set
Yeah.
a baseline. Yep. Another thing about it that concerned me a little is it wasn't always clear where the data were coming from. The academic analytics aside, because actually I don't think we know where all that comes from. But I do think that any way that we can introduce data that faculty
point. It's a great point. We'll work on that. Good. And we'll think about too. I actually like the point of how do we convey where we're at with all of this. I'm even thinking, that we need it to be easy, accessible. It's something like excellence.missouri.edu. I don't know what it is, but it's something like that, and that's what we're doing, right? And I think it's a great message for us to send. We're committed to what we're going to try to do here, and we're going to be public about what we're doing. So great point. Yes.
Along the lines of cooperation, collaboration among faculty, staff, and students, the Mizzou Advantage program was started some years back, and they had 4 different
Focus areas, yeah.
Yeah, that they were working on. Sorry. I sent emails a few times. I'm a master electrician. I was very interested in solar energy and things like that, and never got a response. And it seemed like it's kind of morphed where it's just students and faculty. I think that should be really looked into. We have staff members that are inventors. We have staff members we have one that has taken his property completely off the grid.
Yeah.
We have across the board, many things, and this would also be something for outreach throughout Missouri. I mean, if we had things that we were working on that we could open up to some collaboration amongst not just staff, but also across Missouri, this would be something that would also get them more involved as well.
Yeah, great points. Maybe if Marshall wants to say something about that, or, I think I do agree there's lots of ways we can involve the staff in things that are academic also. There's a lot you already do on the academic side, so there are benefits. I think there's just tremendous opportunity. We have some of our students that do internships with many of you. There's a lot of things you're already doing, and we need to figure out a way to highlight that and also then engage in other opportunities. So yeah, that's a great point.
I'm glad you said this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it tees it up really well. One of the things that we have the opportunity at MU to do is to define what we mean by engagement.
Yep.
We don't have to follow anybody else's rules. We can own this. It's our space. And so it excites me when you say that, because when we think about engagement, I think about it on a continuum. And I actually did a webinar on this with some national leaders yesterday. And to me, engagement's this continuum. And it's everything from that, and I'll start, where we probably historically have thought about it with that researcher who's doing really knowledge creation on a very laboratory, sort of I hate to be the stereotypical view, all the way across, and you can look at this whole continuum. It can be from students, it can be from faculty, it can be from junior faculty, it can be from staff, it can be from alumni. I think there's, for instance, I'll go into alumni. We have never in this country, in my opinion, really ever leveraged staff or alumni in a way we should. That's a robust nation of people that we have allowed not to be given attention to or to truly leverage. And so when I think about engagement, I think about all of that. It's not just, again, if you go back and look historically at Extension, it was the people that were the strong academics creating the knowledge. And we, Chancellor and I had this conversation this past week. Our historical view of this was knowledge creation, and we know what's best, and we're going to push that out. That's the way it was set up. In 1914, that's classic, and it was needed. It was really good, and there's still a need for that in certain areas. Still is. But we're in a new era now where lots of people have lots of knowledge, and we need to be in the idea of engaging, where you bring your best idea, and we'll pair it with somebody else's best idea, and out of that becomes a sustainable solution.
Yep.
And that's what we're about. We're not about being above it all, but we're about being in it all. And that's a very different way of thinking. The Chancellor says this, I'll quote him again. He says, we're not only the University of Missouri, we're the University for Missouri. And when you begin to talk about that kind of model, that really resonates well. Because there are people across this state, staff that work on research centers that do wonderful work, and that work needs to be recognized. There are staff that work in work that Catherine Cheval, I think I saw her come in, that are doing great knowledge work in some of the grants and projects she has across the state. We need to be gathering that. So I can't say I could go on all day, but this is really important, and it's noted, and we got it.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Great point.
I have another follow-up real quick.
Oh.
Which leads through this. Experiential learning. We don't do near enough of that here. We have, one thing we have an abundance of here is students. So we really need to tap into that as well. As I mentioned yesterday at the open forum, at the same time, we have some shortages here on campus and stuff too that certain could be addressed through this. As a master electrician, if you'd give me some electrical engineering students that I could check out and make sure they, were also capable of doing the work, because you have those that are very book smart, this is just kind of the way it is. But anyway, I could get a lot done that way. And it would be, I can tell you as a master electrician, if I got to the point where I wanted to, if I was running my own business and I need an electrical engineer, that student that had hands-on experience and knowledge, that would mean way more to me than having straight A's. And I think that's something we really need to look into.
I think we're in agreement. We
No,
want
I
that.
absolutely agree, and we do a great job here on campus, and student affairs is a great model. We use students in and throughout athletics is another great model. But your point of in the campus facility side of the house, great opportunity and something that Gary Ward and I will follow up on. And it's engineers, it's the ag systems management students, it's our turf grass management students, it's our horticulture students, all of our forestry students. There's a lot of intersections there. I appreciate the point. Absolutely great point. Yep.
Another question?
Yeah, so in a number of places, members of the group tried to talk about where the interactions were taking place between the different areas, and that's great. But the one area that I know that Marshall talked about was sort of the economic education and health things as an outreach type process, which I think is very good. But the area where I thought it should have interdigitated with is with things that Kevin is doing and trying to recruit those students who are the socioeconomically disadvantaged rural students that you may be able to contact. I think in some cases we're looking at diversity and inclusion a little bit too narrowly. And that there was an excellent article that I'm sure many of you read in the Chronicle about the turn of the year using the Boot Hill as an example of areas where those three areas, educational attainment, the process of how that impacts the economy and the health of those areas, if we can recruit those type of students, not only into our own institutions within the system and higher education in general, the state would be greatly benefited. And that's what we're here for, is to benefit the people of the state of Missouri. And I would have liked to have seen more interdigitation between those two areas of goals.
But I will say, I think we have a great starting point with the land grant scholarship, and I think it was born out of that thinking, right? That we wanted to appeal to broader aspects of the state to support our rural and urban core in ways that made sense. And I think appealing to the kind of recognizing the socioeconomic status, the broad view of diversity, which I think we've adopted with, again, in application, there may be clearly narrow forms of it, but I think as a broader community now, we're recognizing the benefit of that broad definition. And I think that's a starting point for us to really identify additional tentacles to spawn from. But Marshall and I have had some really great conversations about the notion of engagement and diversity inclusion. In fact, I took a trip with him to Sedalia to meet with that community and actually kind of talk through our efforts in diversity and inclusion, the way that it intersects, I think, with the community there. I think as a starting point, a broader conversation as it relates to this extension, I think is a great point. I just wanted you to know there's some intentional conversation happening. I think the devil's in the details as we develop it, but I think the desire is there, and I think we have at least some promising initiatives, particularly spawning from the land grant scholarship, that I'm really excited about.
I think your comment's also valid, even more generally, and that is we need to think about in all of our compacts how they interact and actually highlight some of those interactions and so I think that's a really good point. We should do more of that. It's over here, and then we'll come to you, Stephanie.
All right. I'm the graduate worker in the math department. I had a lot to say, so I wrote it down. I tend to ramble. So for the last several years, especially since August of 2015, The graduate workers on this campus have been trying to engage with the administration to negotiate with them in good faith for a fair, equitable employment contract so we can focus on providing quality research and education to our students without worrying about the threat of broken promises. Since then, the university has invested significant man-hours in tuition and taxpayer dollars in resisting these attempts at engagement. In your opinion, in view of the stated goals in this compact, do you believe that those resources were well spent? And as a follow-up, right now, for those of you who haven't picked up a newspaper in a couple of years, we're in the middle of, there's a court case going on right now to decide whether the graduate workers on this campus count as workers, as employees under the state constitution, which would guarantee them the right to negotiate a contract. And final arguments were heard on Friday, and that decision will be coming out in the next couple of months. Should the court decide in our favor that we do count as employees and we do have the right to negotiate a contract, do you think that the goals of the compact would be better served by going with that, by accepting that, or by further appealing?
Well, I have to tell you that I haven't thought about that second part because we're not there yet. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. And the first part is my understanding is that this is a discussion that has been going along, and it is now with the courts. And so we'll have to wait to see what comes out of the courts. I mean, I think that was a decision that was made a while ago, collectively.
And I understand that since that process began, we've got new chancellor, new president. This is kind of the whole change of the guard. I'm just curious if the new administration has had any sort of reservations about the decisions made by the previous administration. I mean, especially in the context of the goals of quality research, student retention and recruitment, creating an environment in which every individual feels valued, which are bullet points that I saw in this compact.
Yeah. So, these are decisions that were made all the way at the board level. I think that they are still there, and they are actually continuing to go down that process. So we'll just have to see the outcome of the process. Okay. Thank you. Stephanie.
Good morning. So two quick questions, somewhat timeline questions. So a couple of years ago, a number of us, faculty, staff, and students, got together and proposed a center for the study of race and social justice. Tom Hiles helped me to start thinking about funding sources. Tom is not here, but and then I've talked with Kevin about it, talked with my dean, talked with, I think Jim knows about it. So we were really excited to see it as one of the bullet points in the compact plans. And Michael called me and said, well, what's going on? I said, I don't know, so I'll get back to you. So since I have you all here, I'd like to know what's the sort of general timeline on that. It is called the Michael Middleton, but it's proposed as the Michael A. Middleton Center for Race and Social Justice, because we think that he represents a lot of what we are trying to do there. So that's my first question. And my second one is a quick one about where we are on hiring a vice chancellor for student affairs.
Okay.
Do you want me to take the
You
first
can take the first one if you want to.
I mean, and then you can add to it if you
Yes, exactly.
So we're very excited about the center, Stephanie, as you know, and we will know from the report whether, so this was submitted, I think, as part of the report, particularly coming from A&S, to the system. And so we'll know by April 30th what the fund allocation has been. I think this is kind of aspirationally thinking that and hoping and expecting that the report will ultimately identify this as a major connection to one of the asks that came and rolled up with MU's portion. So we'll find out if the committee, so just to let you know, this was a true democratic process in that that council, I wasn't a part of, no CDO, no chief diversity officer at any of the campuses was a part of, so we really did put the power in the hands of the people to identify that. So when they were deliberating on this, we were actually not in the room, so I don't know how the allocations actually shook out, but we'll know that, and then that'll give us an opportunity to meet with leadership to identify if there are any shortfalls in allocations that we can explore through fundraising to build in the remaining amount. We also, as a division, committed some, I know for, I think, a graduate assistant as well, so we have some commitments on the table, and then we'll find out the rest, but we should know by the end of the month what those allocations are, and then we can at least identify and move from there if there are any particular gaps in the funding model that you had established. Sorry.
And the second one was what again, Stephanie? Oh, Vice Chancellor, yeah. So you know we're still going through a lot of review of student affairs, and once that's all completed, then we'll make a decision about what we're doing around Vice Chancellor for student affairs. But I'd like to complete that process. And again, I thank all of you for engaging in that process, and I know many have engaged in that. And then we'll see where we go. But we haven't made a decision one way or the other yet. Okay. Yes, where?
Hi, just to follow up on Stephanie's question, I think it seems like there's still a little bit of issue with transparency, and shared governance certainly is something that this campus still struggles with. To create a more specific question or ask a more specific question, since the faculty and staff who put together the proposal for the Michael Middleton Center weren't apprised that it was going into this document, and actually weren't apprised before it went into the document that it was hopefully going to move forward, that leaves the question open of how that center will be formed, who the leadership will be, and so forth. And so certainly from the standpoint, I think, of those who are putting the proposal together, there would be some hope that it would still be coming from that same initiative and led by faculty and staff, rather than suddenly something that is coming from the top.
Yeah. One of the things that I mentioned at the beginning of this was that really what we tried to put in this process, and what we'll continue to do, is sort of what strategies, what types of things we're doing. And we don't know, we have not decided exactly how these are going to be structured. This is one of those that came forward as a proposal. We put it in there because it was a proposal. And now we have to go through the next level, which is that phase 2 I talk about, of we look at it, what's the structure going to be, how do you operationalize it, and that is going to involve a number of people. So we will come back and engage with those groups.
And maybe the best way that I could describe it as well is I think we looked at that as a very transparent process in that the plans that were submitted, we didn't doctor at all, so we received those plans and utilized those as a campus to submit the system just because we recognize that as another funding resource. I think we recognize this still as being something that's very important and sacred and developed by the input of Stephanie, Black Studies, the faculty and staff who worked on it, and ultimately the College of Arts and Sciences. And so if in fact there's funding allocated to support that, that would be going back to be utilized in the spirit that it was presented and asked for. We wouldn't attempt to control that process at all. Yeah. And in fact, we would just be looking for ways that we could augment it and enhance it to achieve the ultimate goal that the group identified in creation of it.
Great.
Yeah.
Yes, next.
So that answer actually kind of addressed part of my question about the Office of Research Advancement. So we'll hear more about what that looks like, and that there will be buy-in about what the Office of Research Advancement looks like in the Office of Research. In a related question, though, Grand Challenges has been mentioned a couple of times, and it's in the compact too. A number of institutions across the country are implementing university-led Grand Challenges programs around certain topics. I'm wondering if that's been in discussion, similar to, I guess, maybe a Mizzou Advantage.
Yeah,
kind of 2.0.
a couple. These are good points. One is research advancement. I want to make sure it's clear to everybody what that really is. It's not advancement in the traditional development thought process. This is advancement in terms of how do we put in place the tools and support mechanisms that enable our faculty and researchers to go forward and pursue additional opportunities for funding for other types of activities that they might be interested in. I think that's a core value, a core component of what we do as a higher education institution, and one that we should be investing in. And that's really what that's about, is how do we invest in that. Grand challenges, I mentioned during the February address that I was very interested in us moving forward with what I called Mizzou Innovates. And that is, how do we as a campus start to address grand challenges of society? And these would include faculty, staff, students, everybody being involved in around some topics, right? And you could think of positioning this sort of as a little bit like a competition, in that people come up with different solutions, right? And then there's town meetings where people present their ideas. But you realize that what I'm saying is very sketchy, right? Because I don't have it all worked out. I sometimes, and I will tell you this, that I will always come to you with ideas. I try to come to everybody that I work with ideas even before I have them worked out in my mind. I never know exactly what they're going to look like. I think it's something we should be thinking about, but I come to everybody and say, this is something I think we should try to do. And I want input. I'm looking for people to engage. I want you to be part of that process. So don't be shy and don't say, I have some ideas there of how we might be able to do this. I'd love to hear the ideas. And so please give us how we might do those things.
Defining grand challenges can come from lots of different places. Some of our peer institutions, for example, look at their own research portfolio, and they define grand challenges that they feel like they can attack. The University of Indiana is a great example. They put $200 or $300 million into the prospect of defining really big global grand challenges and going after them. There are lots of other organizations around the world that define grand challenges and try to get people engaged in doing it. On a more local scale, grand challenges for us can also mean what's important to the citizens of Missouri, and how do we deploy the right expertise to be able to help them. And Marshall Stewart has already begun processes by which we get out into the public by taking faculty and university leaders out into the public and listening to what the community has to say. And whether it's wind power in northwest Missouri, or whether it's broadband coverage across the rural parts of the state of Missouri, there are some significant grand challenges within Missouri itself, and that's really what we ought to be engaged in. And these are problems that they bring to us, not problems that we define ourselves.
And your second part was, does that mean something, envision structures like Mizzou Advantage, right? What we envision, of course, is groups coming together around some areas that they think are important and that we could be contributing, and then we need to be thinking about then how do we enable that, right? And we don't have the vehicles totally yet, but I think, if there are opportunities where people come together talking about going after national research centers, engineering research centers, MRSECs, program project grants from NIH, DARPA funding, all of the different funding mechanisms that support these larger groups, that's a conversation we would be happy to engage in, is how do we make that happen? Because that's ultimately what I want, is I want people to start feeling that they can, if they have a big vision, if they want to go after something that they know is difficult, and I know how difficult it is. I went after some of those myself as a PI. I know how much work it takes. I want to make sure that our faculty realize, that our researchers in general realize, that what I want to do is support them to be able to optimize the use of their intellectual capacity, so that they're not spending all the time on all of the routine things that need to be done to submit a large grant application. We should be supporting those activities because we value it as an institution and we value it as a society. So I'm happy to engage in those conversations with anybody about what we really could do there. and I challenge you to.
Chancellor, if I can follow up on that too. I think one of the things that I have found here is sometimes we already are working on solutions that are grand challenges, and I'll go back to Missouri, that with very little adjustment, we could already be bringing solutions to communities that the dots just weren't connected. And I'll give you, we are doing a project right now in Northwest Missouri on wind energy and some of the issues they're facing. Mark and I are co-investing. We've got, I believe it's 5 colleges involved in that. And so it's going to be an extraordinary opportunity with engineering and business and agriculture and HES and law. So phenomenal opportunity. Another one, I can tell you, the opioid crisis in this state is severe.
Yeah.
I think we all know that. We have assets on this campus, and we're already working with them very closely to figure out not only from a treatment side, but also from a behavioral side in terms of making sure we get on the front end of that kind of issue. So there's an opportunity there. A lot of times it's not so much having to ramp something up as it is to leverage what you already have and connect it better and position it well. So I think you're going to see, one of the things I'm always cautious about, I love the way the chancellor works in this because he does work a little bit, and ambiguity is a good thing, right, Chancellor?
Ambiguity is a good thing.
It's a good thing. And so, but I like that because what it does, it doesn't box you in. And it's what I see some institutions doing, and this is not a criticism, but I think we have to be cautious about it, is you can box yourself in a little bit and say, well, it appears this is all we're going to do. But I think those institutions that can leverage their greatness, focus, yes, but also maintain flexibility where needed, I think those are the institutions that have a chance to soar. And so I think you're going to see grand challenges at the community level in Missouri. Typically, if we are able to resolve or find solutions for issues in Missouri, they're going to be very applicable anywhere else in the country and probably the world. And so it's not being just Missouri focused, but if we look here, a lot of times we can work on things that can have ramifications around the world. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this evolves. And I love the ambiguity because I don't think we have to follow the pattern of anyone else. I think we have a chance to figure out how do we want to do that and what works well here. And there's just a lot of, and the thing that really makes me excited about the Grand Challenge conversation is that we have the grand knowledge and knowledge creators here that can resolve many of those things. And we can add to, but man, I'll tell you, we've got some wonderful people here, as you well know, that are already doing this work. We've just got to help them connect in right ways so their work gets elevated and the message gets clearer. And then from a communications marketing value, we're able to create a narrative so that people in the state and around the world understand what Mizzou really does. And so there's a lot of stuff in there, and then that ties into diversity inclusion, and it ties into all we do. I mean, it all is there. Does that make sense?
I was just going to say, I can really see this as if it evolves in the way that the conversation is going now to really exemplify each one of the compacts in a really powerful way.
That's
So.
what we'd like to do. That's what we want to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments, suggestions? Yes.
Of course I do.
Okay.
As we're talking about doing things differently, that's basically what I'm hearing, that we're trying to move forward. We're trying to think about the way we do things. Marshall said about we're open to anything, basically, right? We don't have to do it like anybody else does. As I sit here and look up there, most of you folks are pretty close to my age.
Yes.
What I begin to wonder is if, well, my apologies, Kevin. But so I begin to wonder, and also as you look around campus, if you drill down lower in our management and stuff, you see that most of those folks have been here a long time too, 20, 25 years. They've moved up through the system and everything, and kudos to them. They do great jobs, but at the same time, if we're looking to do things differently, we really need some new blood, I think. We need to be looking at that and being open to as many ideas as possible. For myself, I'm 50 some years old, but I've only been here 8, 9 years. I was on the outside the whole rest of the time. I manage restaurants and things like that. So I have a very different view of what I see and everything. And I think that we really need to look to those people, those young people, and many of them that we have that are alumni that are now working for us here. And we need to really be looking to those people to help guide us and as we go through this transition. Thank you.
So Marshall was kind, and when he was saying that I like operating in ambiguity, it's true. I'm very comfortable with ambiguity. Part of the reason is that's just compensating for the fact that I also realize I don't know everything. And what I need is I have ideas, but then I need people to operationalize them. I need people to think about what we could do with that idea. And that does mean that to do that, what you have to have is different people with different perspectives, different backgrounds coming in and giving the ideas. And I think we do need to figure out ways to engage more with all of our constituents, our students, our faculty, our staff, and get them become part of being the change that we want to see at this institution. And so I agree with you. I mean, I think it's partly why I put on the cabinet, I have the students on my cabinet, the student leaders, I have the staff leaders on there and the faculty. Mostly because I think it's important that we get that perspective. I wish we could even do more in that area. And I think there's a lot of benefit we could have by engaging and opening up more to conversations. At some point, though, you also have to get things done, so we move on. But I agree. I mean, we need to engage more and get more.
Could I just offer one, because I think that's a really great point, and I think in my higher ed experience, I see it at this intersection of maybe even a grand challenge, but this intersection of career pathing, professional development, and succession planning, right? And I think it's a wonderful opportunities for institutions to really think intentionally in that regard throughout the entire organization in ways that I think will provide, the level of support you're talking about. And I've seen it crop up at other institutions. I think it's a really great point. I think we can be intentional in that regard.
Yes, another comment.
My question was, there's a lot of ambitious goals set, and there's a lot of, seem like pretty timelines that have, we're going to have this by this year. And so my question is, maybe this is embedded in this process somewhere, but how are we going to pay for this? Is there any thought to, as part of this process, maybe we need another area and we need to look at how do we create a sustainable source of funding for this institution that we can use for this process?
Yes, there is a lot of discussion around that. That is part of what we have, and maybe it wasn't articulated as clearly in there, but it is part of what's in the stewardship discussion and around changing the budget allocation. That all ties into what you're getting at and how we're going to pay for it. And the other part to that is to be able to decide how we're going to pay with it, we also need to figure out what it's going to cost. And in many of these strategies, we don't have that level of detail yet, but we will get there. And so what I envision, and it's probably a good time to wrap that part up, but what I envision is that moving forward, as we have this list of strategies under all of these compacts, what we will do is go through a process, maybe on an annual basis, where we identify the top strategies that we want to look at that year, right? And what we will do is then go through and determine cost, determine impact, determine what we think is going to happen out of all of that, and then identify how we fund it, and then move on. But I often say this, and I don't know whose quote it is, but vision without resources is a hallucination. Okay? And I tend not to have hallucinations. So I look at everything very practically, and I do think about how we're going to pay for everything. I want us to put all the ideas out there, though, because what I'm concerned about is if we limit ourselves by thinking about what it costs, we'll miss really great ideas that might cost more than we want to spend, but that are going to have a bigger impact on us than anything else will. And so we shouldn't, at this stage, limit ourselves with what's possible or what we can afford, but rather we should think about what is best for this institution, come up with as many strategies as we can, then evaluate those strategies, make decisions that are prudent, that show that we're good stewards of the money, and then we move forward as an institution. So I completely agree with you. You have to be able to identify the money, and without being able to do that, we won't move forward as an institution. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that's it for comments, it looks like. So thank you so much for being here today. We really do appreciate your engagement in this process, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thanks.
Yeah.